hit our straps at all. So, and there was an awful lot to work on after the game on Saturday, and yet we were not that far away at times. But for whatever reason, we seemed to be a little bit off the mark for a while, and some of our players didn't play up to scratch. So, look, you have to be playing at the top of your game to win in Paris, that's for certain, and I don't think we were there on Saturday.
Agree with that, Brian?
Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on. You look over the course of the last 30 or 40 years, with the success or limited success we have had in Paris, when we have gone well, we have been very, very good. So in 2000, obviously, probably the standout performance from an Irish team. Again in 14, and even though we didn't play brilliantly for the Grand Slam year a couple of seasons ago, we stayed in the game, and that's what you need to do. And that's why even, at half-time, if we could have been 1 point down instead of 4, it felt as though you're in it. And you're never going to beat France in the first 50 or 60 minutes in Paris. That doesn't happen to any team travelling there. So it's going to be a 78th, 79th minute, and you just have to stay in the mix. And unfortunately, we just ran out a bit of steam. Our impact from the bench, I think, wasn't effective enough to be able to pick up the performance in the last 15 or 20 minutes. And I think, the scoreline probably flatters us a little bit, I have to say, only 8-point differential, but some green shoots as well. So there's kind of a myriad of different emotions that come from the game.
So you think that decision to turn down the 3 points before halftime, even though it's been defended by Johnny Sexton, been defended by Andy Farrell, that was a mistake?
Listen, each to their own, and Ireland have had a good bit of success with that. I just couldn't understand the thinking behind it. When obviously tries weren't, the try bonus wasn't important. It was about getting the game won. And yes, it was 6 points. But first of all, just think about winning it first and foremost. And scorelines can kind of take care of themselves. And when you're not chasing tries, you just have to stay in touch. And games like that are all about momentum and trying to turn the screw a little bit. And the difference between France holding Ireland out at the end of at the first half and going in with great energy and enthusiasm and feeling they're on the front foot versus our feeling was so vast. If you could have knocked over that conversion or that penalty, you're 1 point behind. The pep is in your step, and Ireland hadn't done a huge amount, to be honest with you. They hadn't taken a huge amount of chances, but yet they were right in the mix. So I think it was, for me, I saw Johnny Sexton referred to as a brave call. I don't know if I would have used that exact description, but like I said, they've done well with it in the past, but sometimes it eventually does catch up with you if you chase that too hard.
First half, Keith, 4 points down, could have been 1, as we've just discussed. France really, probably pretty much close to just 2 really decent moments. The Fico dance down the left-hand side for the first try, and then the Stockdale mistake ultimately for the second try. They were not very good value for a 4-point lead after the first half. Ireland did a lot of good things.
Ireland did a lot of good things. Ireland had the ball for a huge amount of the game. Whether they did an awful lot of good things is another question. But
okay, so you don't. They had the ball. You don't think they did a lot of good things in the first half?
No, we had the ball for a large part of it. We didn't use it particularly well, and we obviously didn't, because we didn't get the scores that you would have wanted. So I'd agree with Brian that I was shouting at the telly, kick the points. That doesn't mean the decision, maybe it does mean the decision was wrong, but I wouldn't have called for that decision. I do believe that the guys in the field have to make that call. They have to feel and understand where the energy is. They took the view that they'd be able to get over from it. I don't know that we'd shown that at that stage. We were holding on to the ball, but we weren't threatening anywhere near as much. We were almost getting there, but we were a bit sloppy. So we hadn't shown that could have been the case. I thought getting in at 1 point down is a good fill-up. And you can say, okay, we've done that, let's start again. France were trying an awful lot. But they tried a bit, and the bits they tried, they succeeded with. They played very well. They're not under pressure because of the manner in which France play the back line. An awful lot of it is 7, 8, 9, 10 yards behind the gain line. I'd be interested to see what Brian says on that. But that puts you under a different type of pressure, because you can't put that big press defence on because they're so far back. You can sidestep it very easily, which is actually what happened for Fico's run down the side. Johnny Sexton rushed out of the line to make the hit, missed the hit, and suddenly we are exposed, and you have a tight head prop out on the wing. He's never going to catch Gael Fico. So I think they just plotted their own way. They were grinding us down, even though they weren't doing a huge amount. They have a very big set of forwards. They were taking and exacting a toll on the players all the time, even without doing a huge amount. We were fighting really hard to stand still almost.
Okay, and it did feel like there was a degree of tiredness creeping into the Irish performance in the second half, Keith. So that might be the reason.
I think there is a bit of tiredness that goes in there too, but I also, the ball was greasy. I thought we started losing a little bit of confidence. They were getting great comfort with balls along the ground or balls over the top. Ireland were having to go back and were struggling and suddenly giving up an easy score after about 4 minutes in the second half. That takes an awful lot away from a team very quickly.
Brian, on Keith's point about Ireland not doing enough with the ball in the first half, do you want to come in on that?
To be honest with you, it wasn't that they created a huge amount to still be in the game, but neither did France for their two scores, as you've touched on. I could see some of the ambitions, some of the ideas, but it just felt that their timing was off, that the timings of runs were poor, the quality of pass wasn't right there. And it didn't feel like, as much as we were putting a lot of pressure because we had possession and territory, it didn't feel as though, we left lots of obvious scores out there. I think there was a couple of other try-scoring opportunities in the second half that were left out there all right. But it felt as though it was a bit of an arm wrestle and that we were just hanging in there. And the annoying thing with arm wrestles is when you work so hard, to stay in it, and then you cough up two scores, against the run of play, and all of a sudden you're behind. It's very deflating. There is one other thing, just before we move on from that decision not to kick the 3 points. I do think that it was a very poor decision from Wayne Barnes, the penalty from Dylan Cretin, when the turnover at the very end that ultimately culminated in half time. He was on his knee and he had 2 goes at the ball with his hands on the ground. So straight away, that's a penalty to us, not the other way around. And I do think that Johnny Sexton kicks that penalty instead when it's under the sticks. They've had 1 go at the corner. They haven't had success. Another one almost in front of the sticks. I think he knocks that over, and that does put a little bit of a different reflection on things going into half time. So I don't think we were helped out in that regard by Mr. Barnes.
Okay. We'll come on to the tries that Ireland conceded in a moment, and Stockdale and all of that stuff, but just to stick with Ireland attack for a moment. So Keith, 56 minutes and 66 minutes, 2 line-outs in the French 22, both lost. That feels like just unacceptable. And then the handling skills in particular in that second half seemed to desert them. 14 handling mistakes made by Irish players across the 80 minutes, but it felt like a lot of them were in that second half.
Yeah, there were a lot in the second half. Look, I thought it was quite a surreal game to watch. We know that Stade de France is a cauldron. It's great noise, incredibly intimidating. It was eerie on Saturday, and look, it's the pressure in playing for a competition. That's where people want to go and play. I think our lineup has suffered. We missed Devon Toner, and we missed that certainty that he gives because, and we need to get over that pretty quickly because Devon is pretty much at the end of his career or nearing the end of his career, and we need to get over it. And I do think at times not having a full third jumper, and I accept the fact that Peter Manny was on the bench, but that gives a bit of additional elements. But if we're not picking Devon Toner, we need to make certain we have an out-and-out jumper at the tail, because we do need it. And I know that sounds like an excuse, and it is an excuse, but it's just an additional problem that you have to deal with when you're under pressure, and you've got 2 guys that have played not huge amounts of international rugby. It is a huge pressure situation for it, and I don't know, our line out then just didn't seem to function properly, and you want it to work really well inside there. I've been in that position and I've missed those throws. It's a lonely place to be. It's pretty horrible, but we were getting we were compounding error upon error. So we would knock the ball on, we'd work really hard to get it back, we'd get it back, we'd get a penalty, we'd kick in the corner, and then we'd lose the line out, and then we'd knock on the next ball, and then they'd kick it down the field and score a try, and so everything that seemed to could go wrong did go wrong.
Brian, this team have broken... Come in, yeah.
Even when you look at when Boutier was yellow carded and we kicked to the corner, you know, you wonder about the line out calling, and I think you're right. I think that the lack of experience is a little bit telling at the moment, and it just shows what a good line out operator does offer your team. But you know, when they threw to 2 and straight away they're driven into touch, it's the one place on a line out drive, even if you're struggling for possession, you've got to be willing to be a little bit brave to set yourself up for a potential 7-pointer. That is the dream opportunity for any opposition, to throw the ball to 2. They just pile in from back to front and just force you to the touchline, and they managed to get a turnover. Now, we came down again and managed to eke out a scrum and got our score, but it wasn't from that actual penalty kick. And I think you've got to be clever and understanding and know that teams will offer you 2, but you've got to be brave and go to 4 to make sure that you set up properly and give yourself a good chance of getting that line out drive.
I was going to put the point to you, Brian, as well on the handling errors and on the basic mistakes. Post 2018, this team had broken habit with everything which went before, where they seemed to just make so few errors, be it Twickenham, be it the Principality last year, be it the World Cup, be it what we saw on Saturday. Really good players are making very basic mistakes, and it's become a bit of a trend.
Yeah, it is. And I was just thinking about Joe Schmidt watching this from New Zealand, and how he would have been apoplectic at the amount of turnover of ball and how players didn't look after it. Look after it in contact, look after it with ball handling, look after the quality of pass. I just think the standards have dipped a little bit. And maybe they're trying to play, and the next evolution is obvious of what they're trying to do and break away from maybe the last year or 6 months of the Joe regime. And I think the players want to go and do that, but you can't forget your basic skills, and that's what Joe Schmidt teams were excellent at doing. They were very accurate at the ruck. They owned the ball when they got tackled on the ground. We referred to it a good few times about the 60% man of fighting on the ground. It felt as though there was very little body fight. It felt as though there was a concession to being knocked down, and there was no real enthusiasm for getting long body and pushing the ball back. And I counted 3 or 4 occasions that balls were spilled or shot out of rucks just because players didn't take ownership of making sure that there was a marker for their 2 ruckers to clear over and give them a target. And then the silly, ball handling, that's just lack of concentration. I know it was a greasy surface and a wet ball, but they seemed to be managing okay, the French did, and It just felt as though their skill level was superior than ours at the weekend.
Johnny Sexton, Brian, how did he play? Was it the right call to take him off?
I thought I've read a good bit of stuff online, and I think lots of people have, certainly from my perspective, didn't get the 65 minutes that he played. I thought he played quite well, and you got to remember, Johnny Sexton is comfortably still our number 10, and that in itself, there lies an issue. If we're still relying on a 35-year-old out half, as great as Johnny Sexton has been, and I know that there's been issues with, with Joey Carberry, obviously, Paddy Jackson a few years ago, maybe he would have made the progression too, but hasn't for obvious reasons. We are in a real predicament from the number 10 position because Johnny Sexton is coming to the winter of his career, and he's not the vintage years of a couple of years seasons ago, but he is still very much the man in possession, and I think he offers the most without a shadow of a doubt. I think, unfortunately for Ross Byrne, he came on, and for his 15 minutes, he must have made 3 or 4 poor errors. It didn't feel as though there was any fluidity to running the back line. It was all quite static and shipping the pass on, making it easy for the French defence. So I actually thought that Johnny Sexton played a reasonably good game. Considering the lofty expectations we have from him, I thought he was still quite good. That said, I don't think visually it's a good thing to have your captain coming off and shaking his head the way he did. And I'm sure he's regretful of that. And I hope he kind of had a quiet word to his coach and apologises, as Johnny Sexton has struggled to do in the past. I know he's grown as a player, but I think that visually for the rest of the team looking up, and indeed Ross Byrne looking up at the big screen, and it was this prolonged visual of him looking up to the coach's box and shaking his head. As captain, you can't do that. I think you have to be able to park your own disappointment and move on and let the next guy coming in to shake things up. That said, I thought it was a poor tactical decision because of what his replacement subsequently offered.
Because, Keith, what Johnny Sexton was experiencing was a perfectly natural reaction, of course. He's shaking his head, but he knows there's a camera on him, and then he glances up at the big screen and knows that he's on the big screen and doubles down with his reaction.
Yeah, he can. Look, you might get away with it as a player. You can't as a captain. And he has to lead with his body language. He has to lead with his performance. He has to lead with the respect that he has for his coach. And anyway, for me, I actually wouldn't have taken him off. I would have said that he was the player that may have been able to pull something magical out in the next 10 or 15 minutes. And I would have left him on. I understand the frustration, but it was a dreadful look. Just touching on Brian's point, he is the best 10 we have. We've seen other players trying to come in and try and do something as well. Ross Byrne coming in at the weekend didn't show enough. I thought he showed about 6 or 7 weeks ago in one of the matches where he came in, he started taking the ball to the line. I said, wow, if he does that, he has a chance to push on. And now this was a big game and he didn't push on. So are we going to go and look at other options apart from that? Because if he's not going to be the man to try and lead us over the line, and if Johnny is 35 and will not be the future, I mean, I know he wants to play till he's 40, but we really want the Johnny Sexton of 2 or 3 years ago, so.
But isn't the predicament then, Brian, if you're both in agreement that he is currently the best, and you're both in agreement that it's not a good thing to have a 38-year-old at the 2023 World Cup as your starting 10, I mean, someone texted in earlier and said, well, should we, just leave Sexton and, build for 2023? The difficulty would strike me, unless you've identified who that player is that's going to lead Ireland in 2023, you don't know who to invest in. So you might as well stick with Sexton if he's still the best.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. And, for me, the limited bit that I have seen of him, I don't know why is Harry Byrne not getting more game time with Leinster? Why is Ross Byrne continually, if he's heir to the throne ultimately, why is Ross Byrne continually sitting on the bench behind Johnny Sexton for Leinster and Ireland? So I'd love to know I know Andy Farrell does like Harry Byrne, but he's got to get game time for his provincial team to be able to ultimately make that progression into international honours. The gulf is substantial still. It really is. Right. And Ross Byrne has had it tough a couple of times because he played in that England game over in Twickenham where our pack got eaten before the World Cup and he was on the back foot. He's come on to a bit of a thankless challenge this time round to try and make something happen, and maybe he tried to overplay things and as a result, made some mistakes. But I think if you look at the other provincial setups, Billy Burns and Ian Madigan, Jack Carty over in the West, it's a huge investment, and I think it's a big risk in the short term. You're out half a pivotal position to invest in those guys and maybe get it wrong after 6 months or a year. And then do you go back to Johnny Sexton there, or do you go to the next person? So I think at the moment I'd be staying with Johnny Sexton because I do think he offers way more than the other guys currently.
I just remember back near the end of my time, you might remember this, Trico, for Claw and Mick Galway. They were kind of over the hill, or on the point of being over the hill, and Eddie O'Sullivan said to them, lads, I just want you to be able to give me A, B, C, D, and if you do that, we let you go out in your terms. And part of what they had to do was to bring along the guys that were coming after them and to try and help and put the arm around the shoulder and be leaders and mentors for the guys that were in the team, take some of the flack off them. Is that a role that you could possibly see for someone like Johnny Sexton? If you say, Johnny, we need to milk the last out of you for the next number of years, we need you to bring on the heir apparent, be it Harry Byrne, I don't know who else is in there. Is Kieran Frawley, does he get a chance or an opportunity? I don't know, but is that something that you could see Johnny doing, or is his drive still too much to be number one, or can he do both?
I think that's a really important factor. I think he's got too great a drive, and I think he's still got way too great a self-belief to be, packing it in and feeling as though now there's a different role and expectation from me to try and impart my knowledge, where he still has that selfish buzz in him that he wants to be able to still be Ireland number 10. Also, the fact that he's captain, an honour that, as he's, properly humbled to have bestowed on him. So he wants to hold on to that for as long as he possibly can. And I definitely feel as though he thinks in his head, with some of his performances over the last year, maybe they've been a bit patchy, but that, he's right too in his thinking that he still warrants that starting berth. And, as things lie, it's very hard to see the progression of the next out half over the course of the next 3 years to being an out half that can guide Ireland to a World Cup semi-final from the batch of players that we have. And that's maybe being brutally honest, but I think that's the reality of where we are currently. And, people will not give Andy Farrell, cut him slack on, performances and results in the short term for the long-term game. They will not do that. And so he has to hedge his bets. And at the moment, he's hedging his bets with Johnny Sexton.
Keith, just one last one on Sexton. It strikes me Andy Farrell created a difficult situation for himself by giving the captaincy to Sexton. If he hadn't given the captaincy to Sexton, Sexton would still be a leader and a huge voice in that team. Now, and not least possibly because of the reaction when he was substituted and just the general disappointment maybe with Saturday's performance, Sexton's captaincy is up for discussion. That's now an extra problem for Andy Farrell to try and sort out when he takes that off him.
It is a bit, but he also said at the start, I'm doing it by case basis, competition by competition basis.
I know, but you're still sitting down with Johnny, aren't you?
Yeah, well, I know that, but you're going to do it anyway. I think he was hoping that he might be able to get more of the composure that he might want from his 10. Right. And I thought Johnny had been losing his composure a little bit beforehand, and actually I thought he's captained very well. I think he's done an awful lot of things really, really well. Yeah. It does maybe make for an awkward couple of conversations, but that's why he gets paid the big bucks.
Brian, Jacob Stockdale then?
Yeah, a very mixed bag. And when I looked through the game today, I decided that I wanted to get a clear understanding as to the good, bad, and indifferent. So I marked down all of his good moments, all his bad moments, and I found there was only one neutral moment that wasn't worth talking about. And the issue is there's the balance and the ratio doesn't favour the good side substantially enough for international standard full-back. Now, he did some brilliant things as well, and that's not to take away from that. And this isn't about bashing Jacob Stockdale. We all know what he's capable of doing in an Irish jersey. He was outrageous and he broke onto the scene, and he has set those very lofty standards. And he's had a dip in form and he's had a dip in confidence, and it doesn't feel like he's back to the levels he was at a couple of years ago. The issues is that some of his errors feel like concentration issues, and he was one of the guilty parties on a guy turning ball over on the ground, not fighting for body position and those long reach, and those are non-negotiables. They're things that just have to be part of your game and part of your makeup. So I think his rocket launcher, to talk about the good stuff, I think the rocket launcher of a left boot that he has, I thought he kicked extremely well. He must have kicked one ball 70 metres down the pitch, and it is a lovely thing to have a right left foot option, and having a left foot full back, as we've seen with Rob Kearney for years, is a real plus. I thought he caught a lot of balls pretty well, most of them uncontested. He tried to counterattack, turning some messy ball into go forward with pretty good success. But then when you have bad moments, you can't let them be try-scoring opportunities. And the spill ball for the penalty try, there was a grubber kick that he had to go back and chase down a minute before he gave away the penalty try one. And, I don't know how Wayne Barnes didn't see that as a knock-on, even though he had his back to his own try line. So there are these moments that you can't have that high error count from your full back. Spill balls as well, laid on, a ball thrown inside to him in his own 22, just in his breadbasket and spilled, and that led to the scrum that led to the Vakatawa try. So these moments are all cumulative, and again, these are the sort of things that would get you off a Joe Schmidt team very quickly. Right. So I think for me, he needs to get his confidence back and go back to what he's comfortable with on the wing. And I think maybe we've tried a couple of games with a mixture of success. We can see what he's capable of doing in counter-attack against Italy, but Italy are not France, and Italy are not England, and Italy are not Wales. So I feel as though we need to go and build his confidence back up again on the wing. But now he's got some potential newcomers breathing down his neck as well, in the likes of James Lowe. So it's an interesting month ahead for Jacob Stockdale. Yeah, and who would you stick in at full-back then? I think Hugo Keenan's the obvious choice. Okay. I just feel Andrew Conway, is very good in the air, but I do think the extra little bit of height from Hugo Keenan, I think he is good in the air. I think he's got a very natural right foot boot. I think he's got an ability, we talked previously about these high-speed meters, how he's capable of running fast for long periods. Incredible fitness. So I think they all take their toll on defensive teams in the last 15 or 20 minutes of games. And I just feel as though he has the capability of creating a little bit of spark as well, as doing all the basics really well too. His was a high energy performance. He wasn't without error himself, but I just feel as though he looks a little bit more comfortable when the ball is going into the backfield. You don't kind of panic, and I'm sure the rest of the team are looking around going, okay, it's Hugo's got the ball. I think with Jacob, you just don't know what you're going to get on any given occasion. Yeah. Keith, fullback or wing, whichever. We know what he can do, and you've talked numerous times about the deficiencies and concerns you have over his ability as a footballer. Surely, when he's got so much in column A, so much of the good stuff, over the next 18 months to 2 years, somebody can work with him and bring up the deficiencies. Yeah, I think that's the key. I mean, there was one point that Brian touched on there from a forward, and it's a long time since I've played, but when you come out of a scrum or out of a ruck and the ball is back, you want to have comfort for what's happening behind you. I just think because of the knock-ons on the ground and spilling a ball in the air, he's going to be targeted in that in the future, and I think it's going to be very hard to build a sense of confidence when he would be targeted for that. So he needs to go and build confidence, real confidence, doing the simple things and doing them really, really well. When he was setting the world alight, he was still making mistakes in defence, but you could gladly let him off with that on the wing, because he was scoring try after try after try. And you need to be far more assured and secure at 15. And I think he got exposed. And for me, I thought it wasn't a great selection, and it's worth the risk. And if the risk doesn't pay off, how much more damage does that do to him? So does he go back onto the wing, or does he go back to Ulster and start playing at 15 and play an awful lot at 15 and try and learn his trade there a little bit better? For me, I still think he's a winger, and I think that is, that's parcel for it. I've actually forgotten what your question was, Joe. Sorry about the deficiencies. Like, there's a danger if this keeps going. Andy Farrell or the next Irish manager will say, "Do you know what? Test rugby can't afford that. You're done." And that, like, you're also giving up so much talent then. Yeah, but he has real talent, real attacking talent. So it is about getting his technique really right. He got turned inside out a good few times over the last few weeks. He needs to be. He just needs to work on that. He needs to be coached on it specifically. He needs to be very, very coachable. But I still want him to have the joy that he has for scoring, and I want him to have the joy for going around people, chipping along the ground. Like, we keep forgetting that he was a sensation in his first year. Invariably, in your second year, you're marked out of the game because we know you're a threat. So that's what happens. Sure.
he's a young kid, and he was learning how to play rugby on the international stage. And we had lots of that conversations in that year that, yeah, you have to give him a lot of slack, but you can only get so much slack. So he now needs to tidy up those mistakes. For me, the idea of trying to pick up the ball on a very greasy day, running onto it, that's a really, really difficult skill. And he was better off to go down and do the simple thing first, as opposed to trying to do a really, really difficult skill. And so he needs to do the simple things really well. That's how he'll build his confidence. He won't build his confidence by doing 3 magnificent things and 3 bad things. You know, that's where the doubts will happen.
Yeah. Brian, final word then as we go into the next couple of weeks and then Six Nations 2021. It's very clear that England are in a really good place. It's very clear that France are more than a coming force now. For Ireland and for Andy Farrell, if he's jotting a few notes on the plane home from Paris on Saturday evening or Sunday morning, what are the things Ireland need to really get to grips with now over the next couple of weeks?
I just think they need to improve their accuracy. I think that's been the disappointing thing over the last, certainly the last 80 minutes. They did put themselves into good positions, and as I was saying about the green shoots, there was one. One perfect example. I can't remember exactly when it was. Oh yeah, on the 55th minute, they had a line out deep down in French territory, and they had a set play, and you could see what it was. Conor Murray got it, and he was throwing it behind Caelan Doris's back to Robbie Henshaw, who was gone. But Doris just had a bit of uncertainty as to whether it was for him or not, and he plucked it out of the sky, and as a result, we didn't score the try. Those sort of moments are the difference, are the small differences between getting a foothold back in a game and then having to work really hard to generate yourself another opportunity. And you've got to take your chances at the highest level against the best teams. This is France, a rejuvenated France that we're talking about as well. This isn't Italy. So we're going to beat the Italy's. We're going to, maybe not even Scotland now. They look like a potentially coming force. They're going to be a handful. Wales have been disappointing. But from France and English perspective, I think we've got a lot of work still to catch up on that. And I think a lot of focus to give towards our accuracy, which was something that was excellent in the past and served us really well. And we've got to marry that with this new brand of play that we're looking at trying to integrate under Andy Farrell.
OK, on that note, we'll leave it there. Brian O'Driscoll, thank you. Keith Wood, thanks very much.